Hi, I'm Kathleen McGee with Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. I don't want to stand in front of that lovely picture. I just want to tell you a little bit about Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. This is incredible. We've been trying to get Jon Turk for years, and we're so excited to have him here tonight, and so glad that the turnout is so great. So I just want to tell you a little about Friends of Merrymeeting Bay, and then we'll turn it over to Ed, who will then turn it over to Jon. So Friends of Merrymeeting Bay does a lot of incredible program work. We're a land trust, but we also do research, advocacy, and education, because we believe that if we're going to protect the land, we should also be protecting the water and the air and the critters in and around there. So we do that with a lot of great research that we've done, science-based evidence/facts. No longer in style, but we're going to do it anyway. And we're going to keep doing that. And our research and advocacy is actually really well known. We've made policy at the state level. We've done a lot at the federal level. I hope that you'll maybe talk to us afterwards and learn more about it. I won't take up your time with it now, but it's really great work that we do. And we also believe that if we're going to protect the future of the environment here, we have to teach the kids. And the parents of the kids. And so we do some great education work. We have a Bay Day where we get out. We get fourth graders and fifth graders out from behind their desks, out from behind fluorescent lights and their devices, into the mud, around the water, into the trees. They get dirty, they get wet, and they love it. And we think it's really, really important for the new program, No Child Left Inside. So we need to do that. And we also get into the schools with our outreach program, into the schools with our outreach, where we go into schools. It used to be kind of kindergarten through fifth. Now we do preschool through junior high school. And we teach them about the bay, but we also just teach them about the environment. We take critters that we have taxidermied to the schools and teach them all about Merrymeeting Bay, the environment, adaptation, and food webs, and maps. And so if anyone's interested in helping us with Bay Day, we have 50 at least volunteers each time. We do 2 a year. We just did one in September. We'll do one in May again every year. Or if you'd like to come into the schools, contact me and we'll train you how to do that. And it's a lot of fun. And I think you will enjoy it if you decide to do that. This program, the speaker series program, part of our education, so we teach the adults as well. So I will now turn this over to Ed Friedman, who will then introduce our illustrious speaker.
So as noted, I'm Ed Friedman. I chair Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to again thank Patagonia for being a longtime sponsor of our series, and Susan Kaplan and her associates with the Perry-Arctic Museum and the Arctic Study Center for having us and letting us use the venue tonight. Thank you. In my heart of hearts, I'm a lover of wild places, probably above all. And an advocate for them. I've got a background in mountaineering, environmental science. I'm a longtime paddler as well. So I remember well, with amazement, when in 1999 and 2000, I heard that Jon and his colleagues had paddled across the North Pacific, paddled and sailed across the North Pacific. And I probably shook my head and said, "You're nuts." You know?
I'll take
You should. Yeah, you should. So, yeah, Paddler magazine called this voyage one of the 10 all-time greatest sea kayak expeditions. Jon's book, In the Wake of the Jomon, tells the story of the modern expedition, looks backward at Stone Age mariners who paddled these waters over 10,000 years ago. The book asks, why did people with primitive stone tools leave their homes in lush, temperate, deer-filled bamboo forests and abundant salmon rivers to paddle into the frozen Arctic during the Ice Age? Jon argues to understand our ancestors, we must appreciate that spirituality, or appreciate their spirituality as well as their pragmatism. Jon grew up on the shores of a wooded lake in Connecticut, went to Phillips Academy, Andover, and then Brown University. He earned a PhD in organic chemistry at the University of Colorado in 1971. That same year, co-authored in honor of Earth Day 1, the first textbook on environmental science in the United States. Sold well over 100,000 copies. and spearheaded the development of the environmental science curricula in North America. At the same time, hounded by his restless spirits, I don't know about your genes or not. I don't know if your folks were like this or not, John. But John began wandering the globe and visiting people and places in, far from his childhood upbringing. An extreme alpinist and well-known mountaineer, Conrad Anker, asks, why explore? Why expose oneself to undue hardship? These questions are at the root of human existence. In an age when adventure is a sales tool, Jon Turk looks into the meaning of wild places. How have these sacred places transformed the individual and society? With first-hand experience ranging from the tropics to the Arctic, Jon shares the importance of finding the wild in our daily lives. An important read, referring to Crocodiles and Ice, for sale over there, as our society collides headlong into an oversubscribed world. From Merrymeeting Bay to the Arctic and to the jungles far beyond, we're all very connected. Even more so now with today's climate changing at an unprecedented rate in modern times. Over many decades, Jon has kayaked across, as I said, the North Pacific. He's kayaked around Cape Horn, mountain biked in the Gobi Desert, made first climbing ascents on big walls on Baffin Island, and circumnavigated Ellesmere Island by ski and kayak. Probably better him than me. Jon's life and times, people and places in the far north and other remote areas has become a journey he loves to share. Bringing Jon back to Maine as a Friends of Merrymeeting Bay speaker has been an effort several years in the making, as Kathleen mentioned. We're so pleased and honored to welcome him here tonight. Thank you, Jon, and thank all of you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
A number of years ago, I was doing a solo sea kayak trip in the Solomon Islands in the tropical South Pacific. I chose a sit-on-top kayak, which every kayaker knows is a really good kayak for, hanging out at Club Med, and drinking Mai Tais and what, and then paddling out, in the lazy bit of the afternoon. But it's not suitable for serious long-distance expedition sea kayaking. But it's a really cool boat because it's the most minimalist craft that you can make long-distance ocean journeys in. And I was setting out often out of sight of land from island to island and wanted to be in those big rolling waves of the trade winds, that have been going for tens of thousands of miles. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but thousands anyway. And just being alone, a speck on the sea. Well, when you come at the ocean with that attitude, I'm going to make it more difficult just because I'm cool, and it's going to be fun. Well, what happens? You get beat up, you see. Yeah, right. The ocean speaks to you. And I was getting beat up because the cross currents in these channels were stronger than I expected. And so, here's a little thing. If you're off the coast of Maine and you're out to sea a little bit and you're coming to shore and you get blown off course a little bit, it's hard to miss North America, But if you've got an island out there beyond the horizon that's 2 kilometers in diameter and you're getting blown off course, it's more serious, right? So I was getting beat up, and I kept getting washed downstream and having to fight my way up, and it was more difficult than I thought. So I was coming to this little island on the edge of the archipelago. It was uninhabited, and then I had a long crossing after that, and I said, wow, this is really cool. This is an uninhabited tropical coral island. There's coconut trees, you can get free food, and there's nobody there, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to calm down. I'm going to rest. I'm going to watch this ocean. I'm going to get the feel of it. I'm going to give it the respect that it's due. I'm going to try to understand exactly when the currents move. There's no current charts out there, you got to figure it out. And it's going to be really cool. I'm going to spend a day or two by myself. on this island. And I was really happy, you see, and I was paddling in and thinking really good thoughts. And whoa! Did you see that? Whoa! There was a flash of motion out of the corner of my eye. You know, was that real or did I imagine it, you know? So I was a little bit on edge, you know, because you learn to sense your, you know. So I paddled ashore and I'm looking around and, oh, wow, cool, man. These are the tracks of a 15-foot man-eating crocodile. This is really cool, you see. So I ran back to my boat, and I got my camera, and I started taking pictures, and then it dawned on me, where's the crocodile? And I kind of, you know, walked up the edge, and the croc, I followed the tracks. The croc had been sunbathing, basking on the beach. When it saw me, it slithered slowly into the water, swam 100 yards downstream, and then ran up the beach. When it's slithering, its belly dragging. When it's running, it just drags its tail, but its belly's off the ground. And went into the rainforest, turned, dug a little trench in the duff and leaves, and kind of covered itself. And just its eyes were poking, and it was coming back, you see, really slowly. Boom. You see, now, I was taught in biology class not to anthropomorphose animals' emotions, you know, say that animals are thinking like humans. But I had this feeling, you see, despite what my biology teacher told me, that this crocodile wanted to eat me. Right. So I got on my boat and I paddled out of there, went for the crossing, hit it at exactly the wrong point of the tide and got beat up. But I didn't get dead, so that was okay. That's the end of that day. So now when I'm paddling along, there were a lot of villages along the way in the islands, and I had a little more respect not only for the ocean but for the crocodiles, you see. And so I tended to stop in villages more than making camps. And then I thought, you know, the people here have been dealing with the crocs for a long time. So I talked to the old man, and I talked to the young Rasta guys, you know, and I talked to the guys who eat bananas and wear ammo as the currency of the new millennium t-shirts. And above all, I talked to the fishermen. How do you deal with the crocodile menace? And universally, what people told me is this. You see, they said, you know, you, me, Jon Turk, I live in the northern Rockies where the major predators are grizzly bears and mountain lions and whatnot. And, you know, a mountain lion will kill you right away. It just grabs you by the back of the neck and whoomp, you're gone. There's no defense. But crocs are different. They grab you and they swim you out into deep water, and they can hold their breath longer than you can. They take you to the bottom and they wait till you drown, you see, and then they bury you in the mud, and they let the bacteria do the first level of digestion. They come back when you're kind of soft and gooey, and then they eat you then. So you have time. You see, a croc isn't going to just eat you. It's going to drown you, so you've got time. So what you'd have to do is when you're in the croc's mouth, first thing you do is relax. Then orient yourself. Are you right side up or upside down? Get your orientation. Take a second to calm down. And then turn around and poke them in the eyes. And they'll let you go. It works every time. And I saw quite a number of people, fishermen, who had big scars. They had been in crocodiles' mouths, you know, and they say it works. You know, that's your only defense, so, you know, get real. This is how you do it. So, you know, I was paddling along, you know, and thinking about this and kind of practicing in my head, you know, turn around, poke them in the eyes, try it lefty, poke them in the eyes. Yeah. Okay, I've got this down now, all right? So now I'm paddling along one day, and I met this guy, his name was Basil, and we started chatting. You want to paddle together? I said, yeah, that'd be cool, you know, we paddle. And then he says, hey, I'm going to go upriver and visit some friends of mine, have dinner. Would you like to join me? I said, yeah, that'd be really cool. So we start paddling upriver. Now, I'm no dummy, right? I read The Lonely Planet Guide to the Solomon Islands, you see, and it said that crocodiles feed mainly in river mouths at dusk, and we were in a river mouth at dusk. I said, hey, Basil, man, you know, I'm really glad to be paddling with you. You're a nice guy. It's going to be fun having dinner with your friends, but see, I read this book in the United States, you know, and it says that this is a dangerous time and place to be. And Basil said, not to worry, man. If you were in another river, this would be really dangerous. But in this river, these crocodiles are the reincarnations of my grandfather, you see. And I have an inn on this river. And as long as you're my buddy, you're protected too, so everything's going to be cool. Okay, got it. Well, I've spent a good part of my life wandering, and this wasn't so unusual to me. This isn't the first time this sort of thing happened, and I want to talk about that a little bit as an introduction to some greater ideas. So in 1999 and 2000, I paddled across the Pacific Ocean, the North Pacific Rim, from Japan to Alaska, 2-year trip, 3,000 miles, up the Kuril Islands and across Kamchatka. Kamchatka, the far eastern, a big long peninsula about the size of Italy, far eastern edge of Russia, is one of the wildest places on the earth. It's got the highest concentration of active volcanoes and grizzly bears on the planet, you see. Now, there's no geological and biological connectivity between volcanic activity and grizzly bears, but having them both in the same place is really cool, you know. It really gives you a feeling of deep wilderness. So we're going along, and this big slug of ice comes down through the Bering Straits and impacts against the shore. And, you know, you go out there, it's open ocean paddling, there's lots of surf landings. When you know, surf landings are hard enough, but when you've got tractor trailer chunks of ice and the surf rolling around with you, it gets scary, you see. So, you know, at some point you think, you know, maybe we should quit, you know. Well, what did quitting mean here? You see, we'll leave our boats and we'll, you know, just head due west until we find a road, you know, and then hitchhike into town and get a salad bar, you know, call it quits. Well, how far was the nearest paved road from Kamchatka? Well, 9 time zones. You know, it's like going from Maine to San Francisco, back to Maine, back to San Francisco again. Well, that wasn't really an option. So we continued on. So we're paddling up the coast, and we're a little delayed here because we're moving a little slower, you know. What does late mean out in the wilderness? You know, I'm late, you know. Well, it means that if you're too late, the ocean's going to freeze up. And you want to get to Alaska and back to your loved ones before the ocean freezes up. And so we're paddling along one day, and there's this village along the coast. And I was talking to my Russian friend Misha, and we said, should we stop, you know, and hang out with the folks, you know, get a good meal, a warm place to sleep. And, well, we're late, you see, so it's early in the day, we'll keep going. So we just made the decision to keep going. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was no indication on my barometer watch, no lenticular clouds in the sky, and the wind starts to blow, and the rain starts to fall, and the wind picks the ocean up and blows it into the rain, and the wind picks the rain up and blows it into the ocean, and pretty soon you can't tell where the ocean ends and the air begins, or the air ends and the ocean begins. It's all crazy, you see. So we decide to go to town after all. So we paddle in, go through the surf, and this woman comes up on the beach, you see. Her name is Lydia. She's Koryak. And she speaks in English. And she says, John, Misha, it's good to see you. We were expecting you. The grandmother created the storm to bring you to her village. She wants to talk to you. Okay, I'm a chemist. I grew up in suburban Connecticut. I went to high school with George W. Bush, This doesn't compute. But there's a storm out there. There's a warm house in there. I can smell bread baking in the oven, What would you say? You would say, sure. And you'd love to talk to the grandmother, Oh, thank you. You go in and get some dry off your clothes by a nice pechka, a nice coal-fired stove. And next day we went up river, see the grandmother, yeah? She was born during the reign of Tsar Nicholas II. She remembers standing on a hilltop when she was a little girl while her father was down on the beach trading walrus ivory and reindeer for Winchester rifles with the Yankee traders, the Yankee gun runners, so that they could fight against the Bolsheviks. She lived during the entire reign of the Soviet Empire from the beginning to the end. She's one of the last of the healers, of the old shamans born in a skin tent. I kind of like I'm a journalist, I have my notebook, I was trying to ask her some questions, but she was kind of evasive about anything that I really asked. But as we were leaving, I told you we were late. We had to get going. The storm ended. We move on. She grabbed me by the elbow. She's a small woman. She's 4'10" or something. But penetrating eyes, and she grabbed me by the elbow and she put her other hand on Misha. She kind of grabbed his shoulder and she says, you two come back. It will be good if you do. And those 5 or 10 words changed our lives, me and Misha, for the next 5 years, because the next 5 years our total focus was on understanding her wisdom and spending time in that village. So we came back the following spring and went out on the tundra with her stepsons, her godsons, I guess, looking for reindeer. It was a long journey, and during that journey I was muscling a snow machine out of, we dropped a snow machine through thin ice into the creek, so a thing happens. And I was muscling the machine, these are heavy Russian machines, out of the creek, and I slipped on an icy rock and tweaked my pelvis. I had an old avalanche injury, and I couldn't walk, you see. If I could have called a helicopter and take me to the trauma center, man, I can't walk, I would have done it. But that wasn't an option. So they loaded me up on the sled and we started back to the village, and then the fishing was good, so we had to stop for a couple days. And we got back, I was getting a little better, and the grandmother had me take off all my clothes, stand on one leg, put one arm behind my back, the other arm straight out in front of me in the shamanic pose of flight, the crane pose. And she said, I'm going to go to the other world and talk to Kutcha, the raven. And Kutcha will fly to the woman who lives on top of the highest mountain. And she will heal you. But you have to believe. If you don't believe, really bad things are going to happen to me and to Kutcha, and very bad things are going to happen to you. And I said, you know, I'm a chemist. I grew up in suburban Connecticut. I went to high school with George W. Bush. My mother never taught me to believe in Kutcha. But I'll try. And the grandmother started chanting, and suddenly I was a raven balancing on a branch, wingtip to wingtip with a great black bird. I was a Torah, I was a minaret, I was a Christmas tree. I was grounded on the earth and rising to the heavens. And I was healed. So I thought about that, you know. And I went back home, and I came back, me and Misha. And I didn't quite know what to say, you know. I didn't want to say I'm a journalist, I don't understand, you know, explain this to me, you know. So I said, I came back to thank you. And I brought her all kinds of presents, you know, warm clothes, basically a lot of warm clothes. As much as we could carry. There's no road into the village. We had to walk in. So backpack full of stuff. And she squirreled away all the warm clothes, you know, stuffed them under her bed so I wouldn't take them back. And she said, well, thank you very much, but you're thanking the wrong person, you see. You have to thank Kutcha. I was just the spokesperson. It's Kutcha that did this for you. So now, you know, I'm a little bit out of my element, you know. I said, how do you thank Kutcha? And she said, well, we have to go to the other world, because Kutcha lives in the other world. And she took me on this journey into the other world, and it was a complicated journey. I got halfway there, and then I chickened out. I chickened out. I went, no way. If I cross that portal into the other world, I might not be able to get back. I have loved ones back home. I'm not strong enough to do this. I ran away. And the following morning, I had this sense of failure, you know. I had come all the way around the world, and this old shaman had given me the greatest gift she could give me. And I chickened out. And Olek, the hunter, the big guy, came to me, and in a long sequence, a 3-day discussion, basically, he said, well, 3 days of not talking, and then 2 minutes of talking. He said, John, you know why you didn't make your journey to the other world? I said, no, I just got afraid. He said, yeah, of course. You're a lousy traveler in the spirit world, you see. But you're a good traveler in the real world. So you have to make your journey on the tundra. So to give a little prelude to where we're going in this talk and why I'm making this talk, you know, we're going to end with the saying that humanity has gotten themselves in a little bit of a mess, and we have to make our journey on the tundra, you know, but we'll get there. I'm just giving you a little hint of where we're going, right? So we came back during the cold time, and me and Misha again, and we were guaranteed to get tired and cold and strung out and frostbitten and all that stuff, you know. We were making our journey on the tundra, and we journeyed for a month or more, and then when we were coming back, the raven came. to visit us. Yeah. And it flew over the tundra, and it came on big wings like a aviator signaling, "I see you," and it dropped down right above our heads and just hovered there. And I said, "Thank you. Thank you for healing me." And I wrote about this journey. It's 5 years in the raven's gift and the discussion with the raven. You see, we've lost a lot. There were quite a number of shamans in the old Koryak tradition, but when the Soviets came in, they took everybody, every child, just as we did in North America, in the US and Canada. They took every child out of the tribes, out of the skin tents, away from the reindeer, and they put them in schools. And of that generation that grew up in the Russian school system, there are 0 people with the power of the old people. 0. We're down to 0. Extinction of that wisdom. Now, I know, I understand, I've done my history. I know that there was a lot of, that Aboriginal people had warfare and tribal warfare and torture and so on. And I'm not saying that Aboriginal people were, noble in every way. That's not correct. But they had a wisdom that I want to explore here today. So, to give you an example, to understand where we're going with this wisdom, I want you to imagine we're going back to the tropical South Pacific, going into a rainforest down in the South Pacific with a stone axe, not a chainsaw, not a crosscut saw, not a steel axe, a stone axe, and chopping down a big tree, 2.5, 3 meters in diameter, bigger in diameter than I am tall, with a stone tool. Now, I've changed scales because I can't find any canoes of the old style left in the world today, and using fire and stone tools and whatnot, techniques that we probably don't even know about, fashioned it into an ocean-going canoe and paddling across the ocean from Tahiti to Hawaii with no navigational tools other than your own spirit. I want you to imagine being out there in the open ocean for days and days and days, and the navigators would put their scrotums on the bow stems to feel the ocean, to feel the complexity of the waves, to feel it in this deepness inside you, and to understand where in the ocean you were by that feeling. See, and the journey from the Micronesia to Hawaii was not a one-time thing. There's Hawaiian obsidian all through the South Pacific. Those were trade routes. People went back and forth on a regular basis. Nobody in the world could do that today, you see? No community of people could do that today, and that's the power that I'm talking about. So it's been a good part of my life, exploring this power and talking about it. Now I'm on the road, doing my dog and pony show, in Boston somewhere, and some old woman raises her hand and she says, well, you're talking about power, but you're living in your pickup, you're hanging out in the urban jungle. Why don't you go back? And I said, yeah, it's a good idea, So by this time I was in my mid-60s, and I decided, here's Ellesmere Island. It's up here when you push the right button. This is Ellesmere Island. It's the 10th largest island in the world. This is the Arctic Circle. This map has got a little bit of a funny projection, but you get the idea. Ellesmere is, even the southern tip of Ellesmere is way north of the Arctic Circle, and the northern tip is certainly closer to the North Pole than it is to the Arctic Circle. Up there, this is Greenland, of course, and it's 1,500 nautical miles around Ellesmere Island. Given the weather and the food supplies and all these complexities of expedition logistics, we had 100 days to do it in. So that's 15 miles a day, half a marathon a day, pulling all your own gear, all your food, and we had a couple food drops and whatnot. But Arctic gear and paddling gear and so on. And if you don't do it, it's going to be messy. You know, a rescue flight is $30,000 or $40,000. We didn't have that, you know. The pilots, Ken Borak guy says, what's your fallback plan if you run out of food and get hurt and get tired and you don't feel like going on? And I looked at him, I said, we don't have a fallback plan. So, okay, so I hooked up with this guy, Eric Boomer, 27 years old. He had never been camping more than 3 days in a row in his life, but he was a real good paddler. Jon Turk, 65 years old. Eric Boomer thought that Jon Turk was, and Eric Boomer's friends thought that Jon Turk was way too old a geezer to go on a trip with. Jon Turk's friends thought that Eric Boomer was way too young and inexperienced to go on a trip, but we did it anyway, you see. So I wrote about this in the book Crocodiles and Ice. We set out in early May. Just for reference, this is land, this is ocean. This wasn't a mistake, you know, we had done our homework. We knew that in May the ocean was going to be frozen, but the ice out time, the open water time, is way too short to make the circumnavigation entirely in open water. So we decided that we would drag our kayaks for 700 or 800 miles, you know, like from Maine to Kansas or something, to get started before the trip really began. So we start out in May. Temperatures are warming up in the Arctic. Some days it was reliably below freezing, some days down to minus 20, but not the minus 40 or 50 or 60 that you get in a high Arctic winter. So, you know, we're moving along. And then it starts warming up, and you start getting some freeze-thaw cycles. Look at that. For those of you who are skiers, look at the ski penetration, almost zero. You've got a nice crust. You're cruising along. You're on the west coast of Ellesmere, where every explorer had good travels, and you're moving along. You're 15 miles a day isn't so bad. So now we've past Eureka and whatnot, and gotten a food drop. And we're leaving, going from the high 70s north latitude, and we're crossing over to 80. Now look, it's a line on a white man's map, you know, I mean, but at the same time you feel it. I'm going from the high Arctic into the polar zone. And this is really cool. So I got my GPS, you see, and I say, hey, Boomer, look, let's camp right on 80, okay, right at 80, you know, and we'll have half the tent north of 80 and half the tent south of 80, and this is going to be really cool, you see. And Boomer says, okay, you know, you humor the old man. And so I'm going along like this, you know. And then I look up and you see this guy. This guy's waiting there. He's taking our spot. He's right over the line, you know. So the thing about this wolf is it stayed with us all afternoon. It bivvied up that far from the tent. This picture was shot in the morning when we unzipped the tent to a little ventilation so we could start our stove. So what's this wolf doing there? Okay? Well, if you know your Arctic history, in your modern Arctic history, you know that there have been wolf studies in that area. Maybe this wolf is just acclimatized to people and is begging for food, you see. Now, that's plausible. That's a possible explanation, you see. But if you've lived for 5 years off and on with the Koryak people, you will reject this explanation. And you'll say, this wolf came to talk to me. Now this is, you don't lock me up, you can call me a crackpot, just don't put me in one of those nut houses, But I think this wolf came to talk to me. What was it saying? Was this the fairy godmother wolf that came and said, hey, John, Boomer, you're really cool people, and I'm going to wave my magic wand and give you a safe passage across the Arctic? Was that what this wolf? No. No. There is no fairy godmother wolf. What this wolf, to me, was saying is, hey, John, hey, Boomer, you're entering the polar zone. You're going to get tired. You're going to get hungry. You're going to get strung out. You're going to get beat up. You might die out here. Welcome. It's good to see you. You see, in our society, we don't like vulnerability, When we feel vulnerable, we buy a bulldozer. We try to crush the vulnerability, and if we feel even more vulnerable, we buy a bigger bulldozer. Yeah. But the first thing the wilderness teaches us, the first thing the wilderness taught our ancestors, is to accept the vulnerability, to embrace it. And that's the first journey that we as humanity, I think, have to make it into the 21st century with any semblance of sanity and so on. So we pass the wolf and we start traveling through the rougher ice on the north coast. And then it starts getting later in the season and the snow starts to melt. It gets above freezing. It's 24 hours of daylight, right? And now you're pushing your way through almost knee-deep water, ice water. Your feet get wet. And it's hard walking through water like that, 15 miles a day. And so you're starting to slow down. You're starting to get beat up. And now we run into the pressure ridges on the north coast where the wind has driven the ice and bucked up against the shore, and currents have smashed it up. And now you're dragging your boat over pressure ridges. And now 15 miles a day is really getting rough. You're slowing down. You're getting beat up, just like the wolf said. And then the ice starts to move. Now we're on the northeast coast. That's Greenland over there. And the ice is starting to move. Now what's happening here? Well, this is a satellite view. This is Ellesmere. This is Greenland. Up here you have the entire North Pole ice pack. Down here you have the North Atlantic. And you've got a space 12 nautical miles wide, a funnel, and you have all this ice being driven by currents, the spin of the earth, powerful forces driving an ocean full of ice into a bottleneck 12 miles in diameter, and it gets crunched and it starts smashing and bashing and munching up, and now it's breaking into little pieces, and now you can't walk on it and you can't paddle through it, and you're dragging along the edge, you see, and you're getting scared, and you're trying to do it, and if the ice squeezes in on you and you fall in, it's going to squeeze you until your eyeballs pop out. Yeah. So you're jumping around, and jumping over the ice, and this is what it looks like in motion. I got it. So how do you deal with that? Everybody here probably went to kindergarten. You learn this: when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's really silly, you know. I'm not going to get tougher than the North Pole ice pack, you know. That's really silly. We have some silly things we learn in school. What would the grandmother say? Yeah. Yeah. Calm down, man. Relax. Bivvy up. Chill. You're not going to fight it. Learn to accept it. This is the vulnerability thing. This is what nature's teaching us. Or as Marina, another of my friends in Siberia, said to me all the time, if you lose the magic in your life, you lose your power. She didn't say if you lose the keys to your bulldozer, you lose your power. No. And that's what I think we're losing our magic as humanity. We're getting tied up in other things. We're losing our magic and we're losing our power. We're losing our ability to cope. So we made it through the bottleneck of the Nares Strait, you know, and we paddled on. And now it's August. We're starting to get the beautiful colors of the beginning of winter. And we completed the journey. Yeah. Phew. 1,500 miles, 104 days. Thank you. Let's go back to the Nares Strait again. What's going on up here? This gap, this 12 miles, is one of the controlling factors of the climate of the planet. See, because ice is moving, the ice, I mean, we could have a whole course on the effect of Arctic ice on the climate, but the motion, the density of ice, the reflectivity of the ice, and how it reflects sunlight. Ice reflects sunlight, and ocean absorbs most of it. So what goes on up here in the Nares Strait, and what that ice is doing changes the climate through various types of currents all over the world, down all the way to the equator. We live in the Anthropocene. An age, a geologic age, where human activity is so dominant over the planet that we have become a geological force. And 10 million, 20 million, 100 million years from now, if they're sentient human beings, they will identify this layer where there's plastic all over everything as the layer that, you know, like instead of checking for, you know, clay minerals and volcanic ash, they'll look for plastic, you know, and they'll understand where it was going. And this is the age. This all just happened in the last couple of months. You know, floods and hurricanes. This happened 5 miles from my house. The forests in western Montana are burning up. You know, 220 million years ago, when the continents were all different places, sturgeon evolved. And they've lived through all kinds of different eras and different ecosystems and different climate zones. They've lived through the destruction of the dinosaurs. And they're becoming extinct today. Yeah, let's understand what's going on here. This is Homo erectus. Homo erectus was around for 2 million years. More than 2 million, 3 million years. They did pretty well. They moved all around the planet, you see. They adapted to different climates. But they never dominated the earth. They always were within the ecological balances. And then Homo sapiens came along, and they were also, in the beginning, Homo sapiens weren't particularly successful. They almost went extinct a couple of times. It wasn't such a good combination of events. You know, sturgeons did a lot better. And then about 70,000 years ago, something happened. Human beings evolved art. Now, what's important about art? Well, let's look at the human art, early human art first. This is now around 40,000 years ago. This is a sculpture, a beautiful sculpture. But it doesn't represent reality. It's not a representation of reality. It's a human figure, a man, with a lion's head. Look at this from a cave painting in France, okay? This is, again, a human figure with a bird's head, a giant erection. There's a bird over here. There's a bison here, a spear. Guts are coming out of the bison. This is a mythology. This is a story. Human beings, look, chimpanzees, lots of species use tools. Chimpanzees and ravens, lots of species use tools. Many species communicate. But human beings evolved the ability and the desire to think about things that don't exist. None of this exists. They created mythologies. They sat around and created mythologies. They thought about abstract things. A woman last night said, well, my dog thinks about abstract things. Well, you know, I know your dog knows that you come home at 5 o'clock every day and stuff, but it doesn't invent mythologies. No chimpanzees has grabbed a stick and drawn a picture of a elephant with a zebra head in the sand, you know. It's never happened. We've watched chimpanzees for a long time. Humans evolved a different kind of thinking conceptually, and this led to science, to thinking about, in the abstract, about things they couldn't directly see or touch. Look what we got out of this, man. This is really cool. I flew here in an airplane, you know. I'd be dead if we didn't have modern surgery. I don't have a house like that, but I certainly have an iPhone. Actually, I don't, but I'm going to get one soon because my brother's trading in his and he's going to sell me for $50. So I'm on my way. Look, so what do we do with our mythology? We have three main mythologies in Western civilization. Religion, which is really cool. Lots of people get solace from religion. But then we distort our mythologies to create warfare. Same thing with government. Government is really good. They deliver the mail and build roads and stuff. But, you know, Napoleon talked in the name of France. He talked 1 million men to go to Russia and attack the Russians, and 20,000 came back waving the flag. It's a mythology, you see. And, money is another great mythology. Look, see this? I reach into my wallet, you know, and I pull out this green thing, and I stick it in a little hole, and they give me gasoline. This doesn't represent anything. Only about 5% of the actual value of currencies exists. The other 90% is a mythology. We all believe in it, you know. And that's kind of handy, you know. It's easier than carrying around a bunch of dozen eggs and stuff. But mythology allows some people to manipulate the money so they live here. And the people that can't manipulate the money are picking out of the garbage dump. It creates a separation of wealth that never existed in hunter-gatherer tribes. Einstein said that the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So the development of mythologies, abstract thought, created our science, but it also created our problems. And Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb, a population biologist now at Stanford, he wrote, no, he didn't write, we had coffee, he told me this. He said, humanity is in dire need of a spiritual revolution. to move into the 21st century with a reasonable hope of creating a peaceful, healthy, and equitable world. Spiritual revolution. Yeah. I'm a backcountry skier. This is a route up into the mountains. You can see the mountains kind of up in here, up in British Columbia. I've walked this trail a million times. How many times do I walk this trail and think about other things? It's so beautiful, but this is what's going on all too frequently in my mind, you know? We all live in the stories we invent in our heads. And it's so much more wondrous when we get out. I say, manage my mythologies. That's what mindfulness is all about. One way to do it, look, there's many ways to do it. Yeah, one way to do it is with nature, by communicating with animals, by talking to the wolf. Here I am down in the Beagle Channel, also on a solo trip to kayak around Cape Horn, and I'm paddling along, and a sudden storm comes up, and the tide is running against the wind, and all of a sudden I'm out there alone in the Beagle Channel surfing these giant waves in deep water, you know, and I'm scared. And all of a sudden, there's a noise, you know, and there's a dolphin surfing the wave right next to me. Right. And then there's two dolphins surfing the wave on the other side of me. It's so simple. You know, and nature will come and talk to you. If you open yourself up. And once you reach that level, the dolphin is just simply, I don't know whether those dolphins knew I was scared and were coming to help me or were just being playful, but it doesn't matter. It takes you out of your humanness and puts you back into your aboriginal humanness and or your animal instincts and so on. In my book, Crocodiles and Ice, I do a long section on Tibet, which I didn't have time to enclose here, and ended up at the birthplace of the Dalai Lama. And I ended the book with this paragraph. And I think it's safe to paraphrase what the Dalai Lama is so patiently and assiduously telling us. That if we free our minds of all the extraneous input and confusion, the random useless mythologies we invent for no good reason, we might be lucky enough so that that empty space will fill with ecstasy. And then ecstasy will morph seamlessly into compassion for ourselves, our neighbors, and our planet. That one word, compassion, stands out loud and strong in all of the Dalai Lama's writings and teachings as the consciousness revolution that will be the beginning of healing. Is it really that simple? Or should I say, why do we make up stories to make it that complex and difficult? Thank you.